I was sitting at the kitchen table in my villa in Mount Maunganui, working through the stack of envelopes that arrived every fortnight without fail. Power bill for the house in Tauranga where my daughter Briar and her husband Callum lived. Body corp fees for their apartment investment that had never quite paid for itself. 3 credit card statements with my signature on the guarantor line. The internet bill, because somehow that had ended up in my name 2 years ago when they were between providers. I had a green ledger book open beside me, the kind I'd used since my days running the accounting firm in Hamilton, and I was writing each amount down in my neat blue handwriting. $7,240 this month. Down from last month. Which was something. The kettle was whistling, and the morning light was coming in through the Kari-framed window, and I was thinking, in that quiet way you do when you're 67 and your wife has been gone 4 years, that I really should ring Briar and see if she wanted to come over for Sunday roast. That was when my phone buzzed on the table, and a notification appeared from a messaging app I'd installed, only because Briar had insisted I needed it to receive photos of my grandson Theo. The screen lit up with her name and the words, "Voice message, 2 minutes and 43 seconds. I assumed it was about Theo. He'd just turned 4, and Briar had developed the habit of recording little updates while she was driving home from her job at the council offices. I tapped play and lifted the phone to my ear, smiling already, because I'd been waiting all week to hear something funny he'd said. The voice that came out was not aimed at me. "Honestly, Cal, I can't keep doing this." He rang again this morning asking when we were coming for dinner, and I just stood there in the supermarket like, "What do you want me to say?" "Yes, please, let me drive 40 minutes to sit in your damp old house while you tell me about your bowel movements and your knee replacement and how nobody at the Bowls Club appreciates your stories about Mum." I lowered the phone slowly and stared at the ledger book. Page open to October. He sent another one of those bloody envelopes today. I saw it on the counter. Do you know what I thought when I saw it? I thought, oh, good. He's still useful. That's what I thought, Cal. I thought of my own father as useful. Like a tool. Like an old spanner you keep in the drawer in case the dishwasher leaks. And then I felt awful for about 2 seconds. And then I thought about Theo's school fees and the renovation and your mum's hip surgery, and I didn't feel awful anymore. The voice kept going. My daughter's voice. The voice that used to call me Daddy and asked me to check her room for monsters and held my hand at her mother's funeral. I stood up from the table because my legs needed me to stand up, and I walked to the window and looked out at the harbor, and I kept the phone pressed to my ear because some part of me thought if I kept listening, it would turn into a different conversation, something about a difficult coworker or a tradesman who'd let her down. Callum. The truth is, I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of the visits. I'm tired of bringing Theo over there because he hates the smell. The whole house smells like Voltaren and instant coffee and old man. And you know what Theo said last week? He said, "Granddad smells like medicine, Mummy. Like the medicine the dog used to take before he died. Out of the mouths of babes, eh?" My own 4-year-old has worked out what I won't let myself say. He's a worthless burden that smells like medicine. And we're going to be his unpaid carers for another 15 years if his ticker holds up. There was a small laugh on the recording. Not from her. From him. From my son-in-law. At least he's still signing the checks, love. That's the only thing I need from him. Just keep him sweet for another year or 2. We'll be set up by then. Right. But you don't have to bloody listen to him talk about his prostate, do you? You get to nod along on the phone and say, "Mate, that's awful." While I'm the one who has to drive over there and pretend I love him. Do you not love him? Of course I love him. He's my dad. I just don't like him. I haven't liked him since I was about 15. He's boring and he's clingy and he treats me like I'm still 9 years old, and frankly, the sooner he's in a rest home where someone else can pretend to care, the better for all of us. Anyway, I have to go. I'm at the school. Pick up some milk on the way home. The recording ended. I stood at the window for a long time. The tide was coming in, and the gulls were arguing over something on the rocks below the property line. I did not cry. I think I expected to cry, the way you expect to flinch when someone swings at you. But the feeling that arrived was not grief. It was something colder and clearer than grief. It was the feeling I used to get in my office in Hamilton when I'd open a client's books and find the first thread of a fraud. And I'd know, before I'd even traced it, that I was about to spend the next 6 months unmaking everything they'd built. I walked back to the table and I closed the ledger book. Then I sat down and I played the recording again and again. I played it 4 times, all the way through. I wanted to be certain. I wanted to remove any possibility that I had misheard, or that there was some context, some innocent explanation, some way this could be a joke. There was no such way. My daughter, Briar Eleanor Whitcomb, who was 34 years old and had been my only child since the day I held her in the maternity ward at Waikato Hospital, considered me a worthless burden that smelled like medicine. And her husband considered me a checkbook. I rang Briar back at 10:30. She picked up on the second ring with the bright, harried voice she always used with me. "Hey, Dad. Did you get my message? Sorry. That was meant for Cal. I sent it to the wrong contact. Your name's right above his in my favorites. Did you listen to any of it? I just saw it come through, love." "I haven't listened yet." I assumed it was about Theo. There was a pause that lasted exactly 1 second too long. Oh, good. Don't bother with it, Dad. It's just a long ramble about work stuff. Boring. Just delete it. Actually, can you delete it for me? My phone's been playing up. Already done, I said. Listen, I was going to ask. Are you and Cal and Theo free this Sunday? I thought I might do a roast. I picked up some lamb at the butcher in Papamoa. Sunday. She drew the word out. I could hear her doing the calculation in her head, weighing the cost of an afternoon at her father's house against whatever she would have to extract from me to make it worth her time. Yeah, we can do Sunday. What time? 12:30. Theo can play in the garden. I bought him a little wheelbarrow. He'll love that. Dad, while I've got you, the car needs a new warrant of fitness, and the bloke says it'll need a couple of tires and a brake job. He's quoting around 1,100. Is there any chance you could? Of course, I said. Send me the invoice. I'll sort it this afternoon. You're a star, Dad. Honestly, I don't know what we'd do without you. I held the phone for a moment after she hung up. The recording was still on my screen, paused at 2 minutes and 43 seconds. I did not delete it. I forwarded it to my own email account, then to a backup email I'd kept since my consulting days, and then I copied the file onto a USB stick I kept in the desk drawer with my will and my insurance documents. Then I rang my old friend Dougal McKendrick. Dougal had been my partner at the firm for 26 years before we'd both retired. He was 70 now, a widower like me, and he lived up the coast at Waihi Beach in a tidy house full of his late wife's seashell collection. He answered on the third ring with the same gruff hello he'd been using since the 1980s. Dougal, I said, I need a favor, and I need it done quietly. Go on. I need a full audit of every financial arrangement I have with my daughter and her husband. Every standing order, every guarantor agreement, every joint account, every bill in my name. I want to know exactly what I am paying for, exactly how it's structured, and exactly how to unwind it. There was a silence on the line. Dougal had known Briar since she was a baby. He'd been at her christening. Right then. What's happened? I'll tell you when you come over. Can you come tomorrow? I'll be there by 10. I sat at the kitchen table for the rest of the day with the ledger book open in front of me, and I made a list. Not a list of grievances. A list of facts. Facts are what saved me in my career and facts were going to save me now. By the time the sun went down behind the Kaimai Range, I had filled 6 pages of the ledger book in my neat blue handwriting, and I knew almost to the dollar what my daughter and her husband had cost me over the past 11 years. It came to $417,000. That number did not make me angry. It made me very, very calm. Dougal arrived the next morning with his briefcase and his reading glasses and a thermos of coffee, because he'd never trusted my coffee. We sat at the kitchen table for 6 hours. I played him the recording. He listened to the whole thing without saying a word. And when it was finished, he took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes and said, "Right. Where do we start?" We started with the guarantor agreements. There were 3 of them, all on credit cards in Briar and Callum's names, which I had signed when they'd had a bad patch in 2019 and the banks would not extend their limits. Dougal explained that I could not unilaterally remove myself, but I could write to the banks and request that they freeze any further increases and notify me of any missed payments, and I could insist that the cards be paid down to a level the holders could service themselves. Then we moved to the standing orders. There were 11 of them, going out of my account every month. Rent for the apartment investment that was meant to be paying for itself but never did. Body corporate fees for the same. The power and internet at their house in Tauranga. Theo's daycare fees. 2 insurance policies in Callum's name. A gym membership for Briar that I had not realized was mine. A Sky TV subscription. And a monthly transfer of $800, labeled simply B, grocery. $800 a month for groceries. For 11 years. Cancel the lot, I said. All of them. Effective the 1st of next month. Dougal looked at me over his glasses. All 11? All 11. And the apartment. I want it sold. That'll take time. Then start it today. The apartment was the trickiest part. It was in my name. But Briar and Callum had been treating it as theirs since I'd bought it in 2014 with the understanding that they would rent it out and use the income to pay the mortgage. Instead, they'd put Callum's brother in there at mate's rates, and the rent had never covered the costs. I'd been topping it up by roughly $20,000 a year. Dougal said he could have a real estate agent through it within a fortnight if I didn't mind giving the brother notice. I told him I did not mind. Then we drew up the letters. 1 to each of the banks. 1 to the daycare, confirming I would no longer be the payer on the account. 1 to the body corporate. 1 to the power company and 1 to the internet provider and 1 to Sky and 1 to the gym. Each letter was polite, formal, and final. Dougal had brought his secretary's old laser printer out of retirement for the occasion, and we printed them all on my study printer instead, on the cream letterhead I'd kept from the firm, and we signed every one of them by hand in fountain pen. I posted them on Friday afternoon at the post shop in Mount Maunganui. The young woman behind the counter weighed the bundle and said, "That's a lot of letters, love." "Christmas cards already?" I told her it was end of year tidying up. She laughed and stamped them all and put them in the orange bin behind her, and that was the moment, I think, that the calm in my chest turned into something almost like joy. Sunday came. Briar and Callum and Theo arrived at 12:35, which was 5 minutes late, which was as on time as my daughter had ever been. Theo came running up the path with his arms wide and his curls bouncing and shouted, "Granddad!" at the top of his lungs. And I bent down and lifted him up and held him for longer than I usually did, because he was 4 years old and he had not yet learned to be ashamed of me. Briar kissed me on the cheek and handed me a bottle of wine I knew I had paid for. Callum shook my hand with the firm, hearty grip he'd been using on me for 9 years and called me, "Bryce, mate, how are you, mate? Looking well, mate." I served the lamb. I served the kumara and the silverbeet from my garden and the gravy I'd made from the pan drippings the way my mother had taught me. We sat at the dining room table with the good plates, and Theo got gravy on his shirt, and Briar laughed. And Callum told a story about something that had happened at his work, which was selling commercial real estate in Tauranga, except that the story did not quite line up with another story he'd told me 3 months ago, and I noticed this in the same way I'd noticed inconsistent expense reports in my old career. And I filed it away. I let them eat. I let Theo have 2 helpings of pavlova. I let Briar have the 2nd glass of wine, and Callum have the 3rd. I cleared the plates and made coffee and brought out the Whitaker's chocolates I'd bought at the supermarket that morning. And when everyone was settled in the lounge with their coffee and their chocolate, I sat down in my armchair across from them and I said, "There's something I want to talk to you both about." Briar's smile flickered. Callum leaned forward. "All ears, mate." I listened to the voice memo, Briar. The room went very still. Theo was on the carpet, building something out of the wooden blocks I kept in a basket for his visits, and he did not look up. Briar's face went through 3 distinct expressions in about 2 seconds. Confusion, then recognition, then a kind of frozen, white blankness I had never seen on her before. Callum's hand stopped moving towards his coffee cup. "Dad, let me finish, please." I listened to all of it. I listened to it 4 times. In fact, just to be sure. And I want you both to know that I heard every word. The bowel movements. The bowls club. The smell of medicine. The worthless burden. The checkbook. The 15 more years if my ticker holds up. I heard all of it. "Dad." I was venting. I was having a bad day. I didn't mean. Please don't insult me, love. I spent 40 years reading people for a living. You meant every word. So did your husband. I turned my eyes to Callum, who had gone an interesting shade of gray. "I particularly enjoyed your contribution, Callum. Just keep him sweet for another year or 2. We'll be set up by then." That was very clarifying. "Bryce, mate, I think you've taken that out of..." I have not taken it out of context. There was no context that would make it acceptable. There is no version of that conversation where the 2 of you come out as anything other than exactly what you are. I took a sip of my coffee. My hand was perfectly steady. "Now, I am not going to shout, and I am not going to cry, and I am not going to throw you out of my house. I am going to tell you what I have done, and then you are going to finish your coffee and go home." Briar started to cry. I noticed this, and I did not respond to it. As of the 1st of next month, every standing order I have set up for the 2 of you has been canceled. The rent, the body corporate, the power, the internet, Theo's daycare, your gym membership, Briar, Callum's insurance, the Sky subscription, the $800 a month for groceries. All of it. Stopped. "Dad, you can't." I have written to all 3 of your credit card banks and informed them that I will no longer be increasing the guarantor limits and that any default on the existing balances will be referred immediately to a debt collection agency rather than absorbed by me. You have approximately $32,000 of debt that you will need to start paying yourselves. Callum's mouth was opening and closing. The apartment in Mount Maunganui will be on the market by the end of this month. Your brother, Callum, will be receiving a notice from my solicitor on Tuesday, giving him 60 days to vacate. The proceeds of the sale will go into a trust for Theo, which he will be able to access at 21. Neither of you will be a trustee or a beneficiary. "Dad, please. Please. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I didn't mean any of that. I was angry. I was having a terrible week at work. Please." And finally, my will. As of yesterday afternoon, my will has been rewritten. Dougal McKendrick witnessed it. The bulk of my estate will go to a charitable trust I am establishing in your mother's name to provide scholarships for young women from the Waikato to study accountancy. A portion will be held in trust for Theo. You and Callum will receive my late mother's pearl earrings, Briar, because she would have wanted you to have them, and a watch that belonged to your grandfather. That is all. Theo, on the carpet, had stopped playing with the blocks. He was looking up at me with his big, serious eyes, and I felt a small crack open in the calm I had been holding all morning. And I made myself look back at his mother. "You will still see me if you want to. You can come for Sunday dinners. I will still take Theo to the beach and to the playground in Papamoa, and I will still be his grandfather. But you will never receive another cent from me as long as I live, and you will never inherit another cent from me when I die. You may both work for what you have, the way I did, the way your mother did, the way every adult human being is supposed to. And if that means selling your house and renting somewhere smaller, and if it means Callum getting a second job, and if it means you canceling whatever it is you spend the $800 a month on, then so be it. Dad. Daddy. Please. I think you should go now, love." They went. Callum went first, fumbling for his keys and his jacket and saying nothing, because there was nothing to say. Briar tried 3 more times. In the doorway, in the driveway, leaning back through the window of the car, to apologize, to explain, to walk it back. I told her I had heard her apology, and I had noted it, and that it changed nothing. I told her I loved her. I told her I would always love her. And I told her that loving someone did not mean being their bank. Theo waved at me from the back seat as they pulled away, and I waved back, and I stood at the gate until the car had turned the corner. Then I went inside, and I washed the dishes. The fortnight that followed was, in some ways, the strangest of my life. I had expected to feel grief, or guilt, or doubt. What I felt instead was a slow, steady widening of the space inside my chest, as if I had been carrying a heavy pack on a long tramping track for years without realizing, and someone had finally lifted it off my shoulders. I rang the bowls club, and I went down on Wednesday afternoon. And I told the boys a story about my late wife that nobody at home had ever wanted to hear, and they laughed in the right places. I drove up to Waihi Beach and stayed 2 nights with Dougal. I booked a cruise to the Pacific Islands for March, the one my wife and I had always meant to take. I bought a new pair of trousers because all my old ones were 3 sizes too big, and I had not noticed until I tried them on in the changing room at Farmer's and saw a thin old man in the mirror who had been forgetting to feed himself. The phone calls started on day 3. Briar at first, in tears, then in anger, then in tears again. Callum, leaving voicemails in his sales voice. "Mate, let's sit down. Let's work this out, mate. This is family, mate." Briar's mother-in-law, leaving a message that began with, "I don't know what those kids have done, but," and ended with a request that I reconsider the cancellation of Callum's insurance, because his mother's hip surgery was very expensive. You understand. I listened to all of them once, and I did not return any. On the second Sunday after the dinner, Briar came to the house alone. No Callum, no Theo. She stood on the doorstep in the rain, no umbrella, mascara running down her cheeks, and she said, "Dad, can I come in? Please. Just to talk." I let her in. I made her tea. I gave her a tea towel for her face. She told me she had left Callum. She'd left him on the Friday. She had read every text on his phone, and she had found things I did not need to know the details of, and she had taken Theo and gone to her friend Anika's house in Bethlehem, and she did not know what to do. She said the worst part, the absolute worst part, was that the moment she'd packed her bag and walked out of the house, the very first thought in her head had not been about Theo or about her marriage. It had been about me, about what I'd said in the lounge that Sunday afternoon, about how she'd sat there listening to me lay out the wreckage of what she had done, and how she had wanted, more than anything, to have her father's good opinion back. And I knew, Dad. I knew sitting there that I'd thrown away the only person who had ever loved me without conditions. For what? For an extra $800 a month and a husband who calls his own son a meal ticket. I did not interrupt her. I let her cry. When she was finished, I told her 3 things. I told her that I had heard her, and that I believed she meant her apology, and that I forgave her, because forgiveness is something I owe to my own peace of mind, not to her. I told her that none of the financial arrangements were coming back. Not one. Not the rent, not the daycare, not the $800 a month. She was 34 years old and she would learn to stand on her own feet, and that would be the best thing that had ever happened to her, even if she could not see it yet. And I told her that I would help her, in the ways a father is supposed to help a grown daughter, by being there, by minding Theo on weekends so she could work, by sitting with her at the kitchen table, while she made a budget for the first time in her adult life, but not by paying. Never again by paying. She nodded. She drank her tea. She went home to Anika's, and the next Saturday, she dropped Theo off at 9:30 and went to work a shift she'd picked up at a cafe in Mount Maunganui, and Theo and I went to the beach and built a sandcastle that the tide took away. And he cried, and I told him that the sea takes things back sometimes, and that's how we learn to build them better. Callum, I never spoke to again. The divorce went through in the autumn. He moved to Hamilton, which I found pleasingly poetic. The apartment sold for more than I'd expected, and the money went into Theo's trust, which is now sitting quietly in the bank waiting for him to turn 21 and decide what he wants to make of his life. The credit cards, the last I heard, were being paid down at $30 a fortnight. Briar got a promotion at the council the following spring. She and Theo live in a 2-bedroom unit in a quieter part of Tauranga, and she cooks every night. And she has not bought a coffee from a cafe in 8 months. She rings me on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We talk for 10 minutes. Sometimes we talk for an hour. She has not asked me for money once. I am 68 now. I have been to Rarotonga, and I have a date next month with a woman from the Bowls Club whose husband died in 2022 and who laughs at my jokes about my knee. I no longer own a ledger book full of other people's bills. I own a journal in which I write down, every evening, 3 things I have noticed that day. And most evenings, the things I notice are small and good. So if you are listening to this, and you are sitting at your own kitchen table with a stack of envelopes you did not generate, paying for a life that is not yours, while the people you love roll their eyes about you behind your back, I want to tell you what I have learned. Generosity is not love. It is generosity. Love can survive without it. Generosity, given to people who do not respect you, will not buy you their respect, and it will not buy you their love, and it will not buy you their company in your old age. It will buy you only the privilege of being useful, which is the loneliest currency in the world. Your money is not your worth. The hours of your life that you spent earning it are your worth. Do not spend the second half of those hours subsidizing people who are counting down the years until your funeral. A boundary is not a punishment. It is a sentence with a full stop at the end. It says, "This is where I end, and you begin. And from now on, you will fund your own beginning." And finally, this. Children become adults. That is the entire purpose of raising them. The day they become adults is the day you are allowed, and in fact required, to stop carrying them. If you have done your job properly, they will resent you for about a year and thank you for the rest of their lives. And if they don't thank you, that is not a failure of your love. That is information about theirs. The lamb was good that Sunday, by the way. I remember thinking, as I cleared the plates, that I'd done a particularly nice job on the gravy. My mother would have been proud. My wife would have been proud. And, eventually, I think, I was proud too.